Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our read aloud of Bram Stoker's Dracula. We are rapidly approaching the end of the book, which is kicked into overdrive as the forces of good are prepared to directly confront Count Dracula. He has already attacked one of their members, poor Mina Harker. Now they have made themselves busy going about London, trying to sterilize all of the boxes of earth that he brought from Castle Dracula, from the old ruined chapel, so it's holy earth. But they want to confront the being himself. And we are now at chapter 23, and we are beginning with Dr. Seward's diary on the 3rd of October. To remind you, the 3rd of October is not just the date to locate you specifically in the action, but also to remind you how little time all of this has taken, comparatively speaking. So Dr. Seward writes, "The time seemed terribly long whilst we were waiting for the coming of Godalming and Quincey Morris. The professor tried to keep our minds active by using them all the time. I could see his beneficent purpose, but the side glances which he threw from time to time at Harker. The poor fellow is overwhelmed in a misery that is appalling to see. Last night he was frank, happy-looking man with a strong, youthful face full of energy and with dark brown hair. Today he is drawn, haggard old man whose white hair matches well with the hollow, burning eyes and grief-written lines of his face. His energy is still intact. In fact, he is like a living flame. This may be yet his salvation, for if all go well, it will tide him over the despairing period. We will then, in a kind of way, wake again to the realities of life. Poor fellow, I thought my own trouble was bad enough, but his. The professor knows this well enough and is doing his best to keep his mind active. What he has been saying was, under the circumstances, of absorbing interest. So as well as I can remember, here it is." And notice, Dr. Seward is saying it's good that Jonathan Harker is feeling extra energetic because that will get him over the period of grief that is coming. In other words, Seward is assuming that Mina Harker is lost. This is what the professor says. He is going to go on info dumping to the bitter end. Some of you have noticed that already, but he's just going to keep doing it. He doesn't have a character. "I have studied over and over again since they came into my hands all the papers relating to this monster. And the more I have studied, the greater seems the necessity to utterly stamp him out. All through there are signs of his advance, not only of his power, but of his knowledge of it. As I learned in my researches of my friend Arminius from Budapest, he was in life a most wonderful man, soldier, statesman, and alchemist, which latter was the highest development of the science knowledge of his time. He had a mighty brain, a learning beyond compare, and a heart that knew no fear and no remorse. He dared even to attend to the solomance, and there was no branch of knowledge of his time that he did not essay. Well, in him the brain power survived the physical death, though it would seem that memory was not all complete. In some faculties of mind he has been, or is, only a child, but he is growing, and some things that were childish at the first are now of a man's stature. He is experimenting and doing it well, and if it has not been that we have crossed his path, he may yet, if we fail, the father and furtherer of a new order of beings, whose road must lead through death, not life." Van Helsing is warning that Dracula is getting more formidable now that he's in the seat of civilization. He was stagnant in the Carpathian Mountains, in Castle Dracula, with only terrified villagers all around him. But now he is growing greater and wants to start a new form of life on Earth, wants to further a new form of life on Earth, or unlife on Earth. Harker groaned and said, "And this is all arrayed against my darling. But how is his experimenting? The knowledge may help us to defeat him." "He has all along, since his coming, been trying his power. Slowly but surely, that big child brain of his is working. Well, for us it is, as yet, a child brain, for had he dared, at the first, to attempt certain things, he would long ago have been beyond our power. However, he means to succeed, and a man who has centuries before him can afford to wait and go slow. Festina lente may well be his motto. Make haste slowly." But the point is right. If Dracula had been advancing 200 years ago, when he was, keep in mind, centuries undead, the idea has only just struck him, only comparatively recently. to move to London. And we will never know why that is. We will never know how he got that idea. We know that he dealt with book merchants of some kind or other, maybe by correspondence, obviously by correspondence, to get books and maps and even transportation timetables in Castle Dracula. But we have no idea when the idea first came to him or why. Anyway, let's go on. I fail to understand, said Harker wearily, or, oh, do be more plain to me. Perhaps grief and trouble are dulling my brain. The professor laid his hand tenderly on his shoulder as he spoke. Ah, my child, I will be plain. Do you not see how, of late, this monster has been creeping into knowledge experimentally? How he have been making his use of the zoophagous patient to effect his entry into friend John's house? For your vampire, though in all afterwards he can come when and how he will, must at first make entry only when asked thereto by an inmate. But these are not his most important experiments. Do we not see how at first all these so great boxes were moved by others? He knew not then, and must be, but that must be so. But all the time that so great child brain of his was growing, and he began to consider whether he might not himself move the box. So he began to help, and then, when he found that this was all right, he tried to move them all alone. And so he progress, and he scatter these graves of him, and none but he know where they are hidden. He may have intend to bury them deep in the ground, so that only he may use them in a single night, or such time he can change his form, they do him equal well, and none may know these are his hiding place. But my child, do not despair. This knowledge come to him just too late. Already all of his lairs but one be sterilized as for him, and before the sunset this shall be so. Then he have no place where he can move and hide. I delayed this morning that we might be sure. Is there not more at stake for us than him? Then why we may be even more careful than him. But by my clock it is 1 hour, and already, if all be well, friend Arthur and Quincy are on their way to us. Today is our day, and we must go sure, if slow, and lose no chance. See, there are 5 of us when those absent ones return, because those 2 have gone off to sterilize more boxes. The last of the boxes, we think. Whilst he was speaking, we were startled by a knock at the hall door, the double postman's knock of the telegraph boy. We all moved out to the hall with one impulse, and Van Helsing, holding up his hand to keep us silent, stepped to the door and opened it. The boy handed in a dispatch. The professor closed the door again, and after looking at the direction, opened it and read it aloud. Look out for D. He has just come now, 12:45, come from Carfax hurriedly and hasten toward the south. He seems to be going round and may want to see you. Mina. There was a pause, broken by Jonathan Harker's voice. Now, God be thanked, we shall soon meet. Van Helsing turned to him quickly and said, God will act in his own way in time. Do not fear, but do not rejoice as yet, for what we wish for at the moment may be our undoing. I care for nothing now, he answered hotly, except to wipe out this brute from the face of creation. I shall sell my soul to do it. Oh, hush, hush, my child, said Van Helsing. God does not purchase souls in this wise, and the devil, though he may purchase, does not keep faith. But God is merciful and just, and knows your pain and your devotion to that dear Madame Mina. Think you how her pain would be doubled did she but hear your wild words. Do not fear of any of us, for we are all devoted to this cause, and today shall see the end. The time is coming for action. Today this vampire is limit to the powers of man. Until sunset he may not change. It will take him time to arrive here. See, it is 20 minutes past 1, and there is yet some time before he can hither come, be he ever so quick. We must hope for this. What we must hope for is that Lord Arthur and Quincy arrive first. About half an hour after he had received Mrs. Harker's telegram, there came a quiet, resolute knock at the hall door. It was just an ordinary knock, just as is given hourly by thousands of gentlemen, but it made the professor's heart and mind beat loudly. We looked at each other, and together moved out into the hall. We held each other ready to use our various armaments, the spiritual in the left hand and the mortal in the right. Thinking that Dracula is going to knock at the door? Who is it? It's Dracula. Van Helsing pulled back the latch, and holding the door half open, stood back, having both hands ready for action. The gladness of our hearts must have shone on our faces when, on the step close to the door, we saw Lord Godalming and Quincy Morris. They came quickly in and closed the door behind them, the former saying as we moved into the hall, "It's all right. We found both places, 6 boxes in each, and we destroyed them all." "Destroyed?" asked the professor. "Well, for him." We were silent for a minute, and then Quincy said, "There's nothing to do here but wait. If, however, he doesn't turn up by 5 o'clock, we must start off, for it won't do to leave Mrs. Harker alone after sunset." "He will be here before long now," said Van Helsing, who had been consulting his pocketbook. "Nota bene, in Madame's telegram he went south from Carfax. That means he went to cross the river, and he could only do so by slack of tide, which should be something before 1 o'clock. That he went south had a meaning for us. He is as yet only suspicious, and he went from Carfax first to the place where he would suspect interference least. You must have been at Bermondsey only a short time before him. That he is now here already shows that he went to Mile End next. This took him some time, for he would then have been carried over the river in some way. Believe me, my friends, we shall not have long to wait. We should have ready some plan of attack, so that we may throw away no chance. Hush, there is no time now. Have all your arms. Be ready." He held up a warning hand as he spoke, for we could all hear the key softly inserted of the lock in the hall door. And again, this is masterfully done. It's very theatrical. You can easily see this on the stage. But it has never been done on film. This is a marvelous scene. And no one has ever... All the dozens of times that Dracula's been filmed, no one's ever done this. I could not but admire... This is Seward going on. "I could not but admire, even at such a moment, the way in which a dominant spirit asserted itself. In all our hunting parties and adventures in different parts of the world, Quincy Morris had always been the one to arrange the plan of action, and Arthur and I had been accustomed to obey him implicitly. Now the old habit seemed to renew instinctively. With a swift glance round the room, he at once laid out our plan of attack, and, without speaking a word, with a gesture, placed each of us in position." Again, making me want to know about those adventures with these 3 very different people. Van Helsing, Harker, and I were just behind the door, so that when it opened, the professor could guard it whilst we 2 stepped between the incomer and the door. Godalming behind and Quincy in front stood just out of sight, all ready to move in from front of the window. We waited in a suspense that made the seconds pass with nightmare slowness. The slow, careful steps came along the hall. The Count was evidently prepared for some surprise. At least he feared it. And again, this has never been filmed. This is wonderful. This has never been filmed. And then the explosive sequel. Suddenly, with a single bound, he leaped into the room, winning away past us before any of us could raise a hand to stay him. There was something so panther-like in the movement, something so unhuman, that it seemed to sober us all from the shock of his coming. The first act was Harker, who with a quick movement threw himself before the door leading into the room in the front of the house. As the Count saw us, a horrible sort of snarl passed over his face, showing his eye teeth long and pointed, but the evil smile as quickly passed into a cold stare of lion-like disdain. His expression again changed as, with a single impulse, we all advanced upon him. It was a pity that we had not some better organized plan of attack, for even at the moment I wondered what we were to do. I did not know myself whether our lethal weapon would avail us anything. Harker evidently meant to try the matter, for he had ready his great kukri knife, and made a fierce and sudden cut at him. The blow was a powerful one. Only the diabolical quickness of the Count's leap back saved him. A second less, and the trenchant blade had shorn through his heart. As it was, the point just cut the cloth of his coat, making a wide gap whence a bundle of banknotes and a stream of gold fell out. So we've cut the Count's clothing, and his currency has fallen onto the floor. And believe it or not, even though we're talking about a centuries-old Count Dracula, he needs money. He absolutely needs money. But if you're thinking Jonathan Harker slashed with a knife, and you're thinking about like a switchblade or a hand knife, look up the kind of blade he's talking about. Kukri. It's big. It's not a thing to trifle with. The expression of the Count's face was so hellish that for a moment I feared for Harker, though I saw him throw the terrible knife aloft again for another stroke. Instinctively I moved forward with a protective impulse, holding the crucifix and wafer in my left hand. I felt a mighty power flow along my arm, and it was without surprise that I saw the monster cower back before a similar movement made spontaneously by each one of us. It would be impossible to describe the expression of hate and baffled malignity, of anger and hellish rage, which came over the Count's face. His waxen hue became greenish-yellow by the contrast of his burning eyes, and the red scar on his forehead showed on the pallid skin like a palpitating wound. The next instant, with a sinuous dive, he swept under Harker's arm ere his blow could fall, and, grasping a handful of the money from the floor, dashed across the room and threw himself at the window. So he needs the money. He can't just leave it. And amidst the crash and glitter of the falling glass, he tumbled onto the flagged area below. Through the sound of the shivering glass, I could hear the ting of the gold as some of the sovereigns fell on the flagging. We ran over and saw him spring unhurt from the ground. It didn't hurt him. The fall didn't hurt him. The smashing through the window didn't hurt him. He, rushing up the steps, crossed the flagged yard, pushed open the stable door. Then he turned and spoke to us. "You think to baffle me, you with your pale faces in a row like sheep into butchers. You shall be sorry yet, each one of you. You think you have left me without a place to rest, but I have more. My revenge has just begun. I spread it over centuries, and time is on my side. Your girls and all that you love are mine already, and through them you and others shall be mine, my creatures, to do my bidding and to be my jackals when I feed. Bah!" With a contemptuous sneer, he passed quickly through the door, and we heard the rusty bolt creak as he fastened it behind him. A door beyond opened and shut. The first of us to speak was the professor, as, realizing the difficulty of following through the stable, we moved towards the hall. And you should also keep in mind there Dracula's threat about how your women and all your future generations will be mine to feed on. They will be my jackals to command for the rest of time. Write that down in your notebooks, boys and girls, because that is the last we ever hear from Dracula. "We have learnt," this is the professor, "we have learned something, much. Notwithstanding his brave words, he fears us. He fear time, he fear want. For if not, why he hurries so? His very tone betray him, or my ears deceive. Why take that money? You follow quick. You are hunters of the wild beast and understand it so. For me, I make sure that nothing here may be of use to him, so that if he so return." He's telling the young men to go and hunt, which they've done many times together, although never for a prey this deadly. As he spoke, he put the money remaining into his pocket, took the title deeds of the bundle of Harker had left them, and swept the remaining things into the open fireplace, where he set fire to them with a match. Godalming and Morris had rushed out into the yard, and Harker had lowered himself from the window to follow the Count. He had, however, bolted the stable door, and by the time they forced it open, there was no sign of him. Van Helsing and I tried to make an inquiry of the back of the house, but the mews was deserted, and no one had seen him depart. The mews is a name for the stables at the back of every house, everywhere, because there's no cars here. It's just horses. It was now late in the afternoon, and sunset was not far off. We had to recognize that our game was up. With heavy hearts, we agreed with the professor when he said, "Let us go back to Madam Mina. Poor, poor, dear Madam Mina. All we can do now is done, and we can there, at least, protect her. But we need not despair. There is but one more earth box. We must try to find it. When all this is done, we may yet be well." I could see that he spoke as bravely as he could to comfort Harker. The poor fellow was quite broken down, and now and again he gave a low groan, which he could not suppress. He was thinking of his wife. With sad hearts we came back to my house, where he found Mrs. Harker waiting us, and with an appearance of cheerfulness which did honor to her bravery and unselfishness. When she saw our faces, her own became as pale as death. For a second or two her eyes were closed as if she were in secret prayer, and then she said cheerfully, "I can never thank you all enough. Oh, my poor darling." As she spoke, she took her husband's gray head in her hands and kissed it. "Lay your poor head here and rest it. All will yet be well, dear. God will protect us if he so will it in his good intent." The poor fellow only groaned. There was no place for words in his sublime misery. We had a sort of perfunctory supper together, and I think it cheered us all up somewhat. It was, perhaps, the mere animal heat of the food to hungry people, for none of us had eaten anything since breakfast, or the sense of companionship which may have helped us. But anyhow, we were all less miserable, and saw the morrow as not altogether without hope. True to our promise, we told Mrs. Harker everything which had passed, and although she grew snowy white at times when danger had seemed to threaten her husband, and red at others when his devotion to her was manifested, she listened bravely and with calmness. When we came to the part where Harker had rushed at the Count so recklessly, she clung to her husband's arm and held it tight as though her clinging could protect him from any harm that might come. She said nothing, however, till the narration was all done, and the matters had been brought right up to the present time. Then, without letting go her husband's hand, she stood up amongst us and spoke. Oh, that I could give any idea of the scene, of that sweet, sweet, good woman, and all the radiant beauty of her youth and animation, with a red scar on her forehead of which she was conscious, and which we saw with grinding of our teeth, remembering whence and how it came. Her loving kindness against our grim hate, her tender fate against all our fears and doubting, and we, knowing that so far as symbols went, she, with all her goodness and purity and face, was outcast from God. Jonathan, she said, and the words sounded like music on her lips. It was so full of love and tenderness. Jonathan, dear, and you are all my true, true friends. I want you to bear something in mind through all this dreadful time. I know that you fight, that you must destroy, even as you destroyed the false Lucy, so that the true Lucy might live hereafter. But it is not work of hate. That poor soul who was wrought with all this misery is the saddest case of all. Just think what will be his joy when he too is destroyed in his worser part, so that his better may have spiritual immortality. She's feeling sorry for the Count. You must be pitiful to him too, though it may not hold your hands from his destruction. As she spoke, I could see her husband's face darken and draw together, as though the passion in him were shriveling his being to its core. Instinctively, the clasp of his wife's hands grew closer, till his knuckles looked white. She did not flinch from the pain which I knew she must have suffered, but looked at him with eyes that were more appealing than ever. As she stopped speaking, he leaped to his feet, almost tearing his hand from hers as he spoke. May God give him into my hand just long enough to destroy that earthly life of his, which we are aiming at. If beyond it I could send his soul forever and ever into burning hell, I would do it. Oh, hush, hush, in the name of good God, don't say such things, Jonathan, my husband, or you will crush me with fear and horror. Just think, my dear, I have been thinking all of this all day long, of that, perhaps, some day, I, too, might need such pity. That some other like you, with equal cause for anger, may deny it to me. Oh, my husband, indeed, I would have spared you such a thought as that, had there been another way, but I pray that God may not treasure your wild words, except as the heartbroken wail of a very loving and sorely stricken man. Oh God, let these poor white hairs go in evidence of what he has suffered, who has all his life done no wrong, on whom so many sorrows have come. We men were all in tears now. There was no resisting them, and we wept openly. She wept too, to see that her sweeter counsels had prevailed. Her husband flung himself on his knees beside her, and putting his arm round her, hid his face in the folds of her dress. Where would that put her face? Where would that put his face if she's still standing? Oh, Bram. Van Helsing beckoned us to us, and we stole out of the room, leaving the two young, loving hearts alone with their God. Before they retired, the professor fixed up the room against any coming of the vampire, and assured Mrs. Harker that she might rest in peace. She tried to school herself to the belief, and manifestly for her husband's sake, tried to seem content. It was a brave struggle, and was, I think and believe, not without its reward. Van Helsing had placed a hand at the bell, which either one of them was to sound in case of any emergency. When they had retired, Quincy, Godalming, and I arranged that we should sit up, dividing the night between us, and watch over the safety of the poor stricken lady. The first watch falls to Quincy, so the rest of us shall be off to bed as soon as we can. Godalming has already turned in, for his is the second watch. Now that my work is done, I too shall go to bed. Then we get an excerpt from Jonathan Harker's journal, close to midnight. So the switch from October 3rd to October 4th. I thought yesterday would never end. There was over me a yearning for sleep, in some sort of blind belief that to wake would be to find things changed, and that any change must now be for the better. Before we parted, we discussed what our next step would be, but we could arrive at no result. All we knew was that one earth box remained, and that the Count alone knew where it was. If he chooses to lie hidden, he may baffle us for years, and in the meantime... Oh, the thought is too horrible. I dare not think it even now. In the meantime, his wife becomes undead. This I know, that if ever there was a woman who was all perfection, that one is my poor wronged darling. I love her 1,000 times more for her sweet pity of last night, a pity that made my own hate of the monster seem despicable. Surely God will not permit the world to be poorer by the loss of such a creature. Why do people keep invoking God here in the final act of this book, when this creature has been alive and killing people for centuries? under God's full view. This is hope to me. We are all drifting reefwards now, and the faith is our only anchor. Thank God, Mina is sleeping, and sleeping without dreams. I fear what her dreams might be like, with such terrible memories to ground them in. She has not been so calm within my seeing since the sunset. Then, for a while, there came over her face a repose which was like spring after the blasts of March. I thought at the time that it was the softness of the red sunset on her face, but somehow now I think it has a deeper meaning. I am not sleepy myself, though I am weary to death. However, I must try to sleep, for there is tomorrow to think of, and there is no rest for me until ... And then he adds later in his journal, I must have fallen asleep, for I was awakened by Mina, who was sitting up in bed with a startled look on her face. I could see easily, for we did not leave the room in darkness. She had placed a warning hand over my mouth, and now she whispered in my ear, Hush, there's someone in the corridor. I got up softly, and crossing the room, gently opened the door. Just outside, stretched on a mattress, lay Mr. Morris, wide awake. He raised a warning hand for silence as he whispered to me, Hush, go back to bed. He's all right. One of us will be here all night. We don't mean to take any chances. His look and gesture forbade discussion, so I came back and told Mina. She sighed, and positively a shadow of a smile stole over her poor, pale face as she put her arm round me and said softly, Oh, thank God for good, brave men. With a sigh, she sank back to sleep again. I write this now as I am not sleepy, though I must try again. Then we have the morning of the 4th of October, so day has broken. Once again during the night I was wakened by Mina. This time we had all had a good sleep, for the gray of the coming dawn was making the windows into sharp oblongs, and the gas flame was like a speck rather than a disk of light. She said to me hurriedly, Go, call the professor. I want to see him at once. Why? I asked. I have an idea. I suppose it must have come in the night and matured without my knowing it. He must hypnotize me before the dawn, and then I shall be able to speak. Go, quick, dearest. The time is getting close. I went to the door. Dr. Seward was resting on the mattress, and seeing me, he sprang to his feet. Is anything wrong? No, I replied, but Mina wants to see Dr. Van Helsing at once. I will go, he said, and hurried to the professor's room. In 2 or 3 minutes later, Van Helsing was in the room in his dressing gown, and Mr. Morris and Lord Godalming were with Dr. Seward at the door, asking questions. When the professor saw Mina, a positive smile, ousted the anxiety of his face, and he rubbed his hands and said, Oh, my dear Madam Mina, this is indeed a change. See, friend Jonathan, we have got our dear Madam Mina as of old back to us today. Then, turning to her, he said cheerfully, And what am I to do for you? For at this hour you do not want me for nothings. It's just nothing, singular, you foreign loon. I want you to hypnotize me, she said. Do it before dawn, for I feel that then I can speak and speak freely. Be quick, for the time is short. Without a word, he motioned her to sit up in bed. So Dr. Van Helsing can hypnotize people now. Looking fixedly at her, he commenced to make passes in front of her and from over the top of her head and downward, with each hand in turn. Mina gazed at him fixedly for a few minutes, during which my own heart beat like a trip hammer, for I felt that some crisis was at hand. Gradually her eyes closed, and she sat stock still. Only by the gentle heaving of her bosom could one know that she was alive. The professor made a few more passes, and then stopped, and I could see that his forehead was covered with great beads of perspiration. Mina opened her eyes, but she did not seem the same woman. There was a far-away look in her eyes, and her voice had a sad dreaminess which was new to me. Raising his hand to impose silence, the professor motioned me to bring the others in. They came in tiptoe, closing the door behind them, and stood at the foot of the bed, looking on. Mina appeared not to see them. The stillness was broken by Van Helsing's voice, speaking in a low, level tone which would not break the current of her thoughts. Where are you? The answer came in a neutral way. I do not know. Sleep has no place that can call its own. For several minutes there was silence. Mina sat rigid, and the professor stood staring at her fixedly. The rest of us hardly dared to breathe. The room was growing lighter. Without taking his eyes from Mina's face, Dr. Van Helsing motioned me to pull up the blind. I did so, and the day seemed just upon us. A red streak shot up, and a rosy light seemed to diffuse itself through the room. On the instant, the professor spoke again. Where are you now? The answer came dreamily, but with intention. It was as though she were interpreting something. I have heard her use the same tone when reading her shorthand notes. I do not know. It is all strange to me. What do you see? I can see nothing. It is all dark. What do you hear? I could detect the strain of the professor's patient voice. The lapping of water. is gurgling by, and little waves leap. I can hear them on the outside." "Then you are on a ship." We all looked at each other, trying to glean something each from the other. We were afraid to think. The answer came quick. "Oh, yes." "What else do you hear?" "The sound of men stamping overhead as they run about. There is the creaking of a chain, and the loud tinkle of the check on the capstans falls into the ratchet." "What are you doing?" "I am still. Oh, so still. It is like death." The voice faded away into a deep breath as of one sleeping, and the open eyes closed again. Do you see what's happening here? Notice there's no explanation being given. So us first-time Victorian readers have to piece together what's happening here. By this time the sun had risen, and we were all in the full light of day. Dr. Van Helsing placed his hands on Mina's shoulders and laid her head down softly on the pillow. She lay like a sleeping child for a few moments, and then, with a long sigh, awoke and stared in wonder to see us all around her. "Have I been talking in my sleep?" was all she said. She seemed, however, to know the situation without telling, though she was eager to know what she had told. The professor repeated the conversation, and she said, "Then there's not a moment to lose. It may not be too late." Mr. Morris and Lord Godalming started for the door, but the professor's calm voice called them back. "Stay, my friends. That ship, wherever it was weighing anchor whilst she spoke. There are many ships weighing anchor at the moment in your oh-so-great port of London. Which of them is it that you seek? God be thanked that we have once again a clue, though whither it may lead us we do not know. We have been blind somewhat, blind after the manner of men, since when we can look back we see what we might have seen looking forward if we had been able to see what we might have seen." Yeah, that's really clear, you foreign loon. "Alas, but the sentence is a puddle, is it not?" "Well, it wouldn't be if you learned the language." "You brilliant man. We can know now what was in the Count's mind when he seized the money, that though Jonathan Harker's fierce knife put him in danger that even he dread, he meant to escape. Hear me, escape. He saw that with but one earthbox left and a pack of men following like dogs after a fox, this London was no place for him. He have take his last earthbox on board a ship, and he have leave land. He think to escape, but no, we follow him. Tally-ho, as friend Arthur would say when he put on his red frock. Our old fox is wily, oh, so wily, and we must follow with wile. I, too, am wily. I think his mind in a little while. In meantime we may rest in peace, for there are waters between us which he do not want to pass, and which he could not if he would, unless the ship were to touch land, and then only at full or slack tide. See, the sun is just rose, and all day to sunset is to us. Let us take bath and dress, and have breakfast, which we all need, and which we can eat comfortable, since he be not in the same land with us." Mina looked at him appealingly, and she asked, "But why need we seek him further when he has gone away from us?" He took his hand and patted it when he replied, "Ask me nothing as yet. When we have breakfast, then I answer all questions." He would say no more, and we separated to dress. After breakfast, Mina repeated her question. He looked at her gravely for a minute, and then said sorrowfully, "Because, my dear Madam Mina, now more than ever we must find him, even if we must follow him to the jaws of hell." She grew paler, and asked faintly, "Why?" "Because," he answered solemnly, "he can live for centuries, and you are but mortal woman. Time is now to be dreaded, since once he put that mark upon your throat." I was just in time to catch her as she fell in a faint. That is the end of the chapter, where we have not had that business explained at all. Mina suddenly has the idea, hypnotize me, and learn something that I don't know in my conscious mind. But we haven't had it explained. I'm sorry, I'm blocking the Count. Van Helsing will explain it, but it's pretty obvious, right? Mina has a connection with the Count. The things that she is sensing, I am all in still like death. I am locked in the dark, in a box, in other words. But I can hear things. I can hear the clanking of the chains, the weighing of the anchor. That's what the Count is experiencing. They have another weapon. She is connected to him telepathically. And maybe he doesn't know it. Maybe. She drank his blood. She knows that he is now on board a ship, that he is leaving London. He's not in the city anymore. And Van Helsing is saying that as long as he's alive, she's in danger of turning to the undead. So he must be killed. I think just a little thing that I want to point out here is just a tiny little thing. I want to point out echoes here that you may or may not be noticing yourself, that may or may not be real. As far as I know, there's no literary study on the subject. But one person who was eagerly reading this as a young boy, just as we're reading it now, was J.R.R. Tolkien, beyond any doubt. And notice the echoes that we're getting here. The through a glass but darkly revelations of hypnotism in here are very much like what we see very dimly through the Palantir. And also, in the Council of Elrond, a question is asked just as Mina asks it here. If he's left London, why bother with him anymore? And Gandalf's answer about the One Ring is that we must seek to put an end to this thing. It's not for us just to clear it for our day and the time in the fields we know. We must end this thing forever if we can. And Van Helsing clearly thinks the same thing. Except that Gandalf can speak in complete sentences. Anyway, we're going to move on. We have some traveling to do, obviously, because the Count is on the move. So we will move on next time, and I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.